My name is Ivana Podnar, and I am an assistant professor at the School of Design, Faculty of Architecture at the University of Zagreb. The field of my interest is urban iconography, and my latest research was on the island iconography transformed under the influence of industrial architecture. On this occasion, I'd like to present the case study of the island Brač, third largest Croatian island, with a focus on Postira, a small town located on the northern side of the island and marked red on the map. The first mentioning of Postira dates back to the 14th century. The very name of the place comes from the Latin name pastura, meaning pasture, and it is significant because it defines not only the dominant original activity of the place, but also the contemporary one. Some of the oldest monuments date back to early Christian period, from 5th and 6th centuries, and they are represented on the left image. The very settlement was formed in the 16th century. It was defined by the free irregular grid of streets paved with sea pebbles and bordered by houses of traditional architectural heritage. Some of the oldest monuments date back to the 16th century and are represented on the left image. It is the parish church. There is also a Baroque church of St. Anthony. Postira historically focused on the development of agriculture and animal husbandry, and already in 1907 the 13th factory was opened. Therefore, Postira's modern development is inextricably linked to industry, which originally develops on the tradition of fishing as one of the main economic resources. As already mentioned, the 13th factory was founded in 1907 by the Viennese industrialist Karl Varchanek on the sea coast in a bay located north of the city center. During its long history, the factory has changed owners and structures, with a change of location in 2013 by moving to Ratat's business zone. The very existence of the factory ensured diversification of activities, but also the stability of the population, not only economically, but also numerically. The success of the business is proven by high export rate, around 80%, and numerous awards. On the image here, we can see the original factory that was a ground floor building consisted of 3 longitudinal volumes defined by a gabled roof, large rectangular windows with wooden shutters, and a porch on the longitudinal side. 2 tall chimneys dominated in front of the central building. So the location of the original factory next to the sea coast had a great importance for the identity image of the place. The main reason for its location was, of course, utilitarian, to preserve the freshness of the products because of the proximity to the port and fish processing plants, and it also became an indispensable place in the visual image of the city. Despite of that, we can see some of the old postcards from Postira dating back at the beginning of the 20th century that represent panoramic motifs that, with skillful framing, actually evade the motif of factory. We do know that the factory is located on the right side, but is not visible, it is not presented in the postcards. Such a process reveals the position of the sardine factory in the shaping of urban iconography. Therefore, the factory had a vital importance for the survival of the place. It also embodied the image of the islanders precisely as fishermen and island women as those who traditionally had the role of preparing fish. The iconographic importance that confirms the resilience of these identities is visible on postcards that will proudly highlight the figure of the factory, factory workers, and fishing boats, and they are represented here. But those postcards are produced for the needs of local population, and the ones seen in the previous slide is produced for the needs of experience of others, meaning tourists. The importance of the sardine factory, not only as a resource but also as a character, is evidenced by the film Slavica. This was the first Yugoslav full-length movie made in 1946. The setting of the movie was in an unnamed place on some Dalmatian island, although the film images reveal that it is Postira. One of the key characters in the movie is the factory, called Fabrika. Fabrica, the factory, is a key plot point. It is also a place of confirmation of belonging, while working in the factory is a proof of loyalty to the political regime, and leaving the factory is a symbolic act of liberation and enlightenment in which the old factory enslaves the locals and only the most daring break this relationship. Film images, like the one presented here, with panoramic shots, show that the factory itself is not visible, only in a fragment, meaning here on the left side. But more than a visual image, it is key as the mental image, as a topos of identification. Man as a working being is formed through specific values that different types of work imply. There's also one film shot showing workers leaving the factory, because the factory is not only a workplace, but a place where ideological values are formed, like freedom, justice, and patriotism. They are also tested with the role of Fabrica. The specificity of this symbolization of the factory lies in the fact that precisely in Yugoslav society, industrialization was the measuring unit of general social progress. Workers were yesterday peasants, and factories were celebrated as guardians of social capital. So it is quite interesting to see that in this movie, Slavica, the factory is represented within a completely different rhetorical framework, because in this film, Fabrica is a symbol of working for private interests and national traitors. That actually indicates that Fabrica, the factory, is a character whose nature depends on the external and structural factors. Exceptionally, we find images of factory in the paintings. This painting was commissioned by Ante Matolic, former manager of the factory, on the occasion of his retirement. So he commissioned the painting from the local painter Pavlo Gospodetic, who represented the factory from a sea view and iconographically corresponding to the typical island motifs of the sea, fishermen, and white houses, which in this case is the factory building, harmoniously integrated into the landscape. Here we will represent the transition from the factory to the hotel that happened in 2013. In this year, the old factory, shown on the left side, was relocated to the new location on the southern part of the town, and it is represented in the image on the right side. On the location of the former factory, 10 years later, in 2023, the View Hotel was built. So the sardine factory did not cease to exist, it was only relocated, and the new factory enabled better production and environmental protection. But the relocation of the factory dramatically changed the appearance of the whole place. So we had a one-story building harmoniously integrated into the view of the coast and the city. But by changing the spatial plan, a 5-story hotel with a surface area 13 times larger was being constructed. The old factory occupied area around 2,000 square meters, and new hotel occupies area 30,000 square meters. We can see on the image elongated form of the hotel that follows the winding of the coast on which it rests, and when it is viewed from a distance, it looks like a cruise ship. The huge scale of the hotel, 240 rooms, is perceived as a foreign body that accidentally ran aground on the coast of a small town. Within the research, I tried to find some of the arguments for such dramatical investment. So I studied strategic development program of the municipality of Postira from the period 2020-2027. I represent here some of the data from this document. This is the analysis of the state of employees, and the data shows that almost 26% of all employees are in the processing industry, 90% in agriculture and fisheries. Same document represents also the SWOT analysis. This is taken directly from the document, so it is in Croatian, but I will translate the most interesting parts, and I highlighted them red in the original document. So the SWOT analysis highlights as the main strength tourism that is not aimed at mass tourism, but at a long tradition of small hotel business and family renters, although the construction of a new hotel as a driver for the further planned development of tourism is also planned. These two statements are highlighted in the document. The development of new forms of tourism stands out as an opportunity. If we compare the last two statements, meaning new forms of tourism and the construction of a new hotel as a driver for the further planned development, could be interpreted as a contradictory to the first statement, and that is tourism that is not aimed at mass tourism. The construction of the new hotel caused numerous negative comments from the local population. Here is the example of I Love Postira Facebook page with comments like Volkswagen Promenade, Golf Park, it's just a cruise ship that will soon sail away, or something like that in our harbor, etc. The professional public also reacted negatively. They pointed to the spatial and conceptual lack of integration of the new hotel into the place. The design as well as the construction of the hotel does seem like a foreign character in the image of the city, and the local population do not identify with its dimensions, forms, functions, nor meanings. Especially devastating is the new look when approaching Postira from the well-maintained promenade from the neighboring town of Splitska, which is shown on this image, but also when approaching the place from the seaside. In further research, I also researched the development plan from 2021, and I will quote here some of the key statements that consider the guidelines for the construction of the new hotel. So I quote, harmonious spatial relationships should be achieved within the micro-unit of the tourist zone and in relation to the coastal stretch. The micro-relief of the location should be appropriately valorized and respected by forming terraced areas with spaces for rest and recreation while retaining high-quality tall vegetation and supplementing it with the planting of indigenous species. The interpolation of green volumes into the terrace surfaces of the unbuildable part of the parcel aims to fit the complex into the image of the environment with construction in the landscape. And the last one, not to allow the planned operations in the area to negatively affect the landscape values of the area. End of quote. The results are shown in the images. To conclude, the analysis of Postira showed the complexity of the process of constructing, deconstructing, and reconstructing urban iconography. In looking at a phenomena, different types of images were studied. First, those images that were created in order to shape the identity of a place tailored to the expectations of others, mainly meaning tourists, like postcards and tourist materials. Second, media images, verbal and graphic ones, that reflect the specificity of social and political reality. Third, artistic images, like film images and paintings, that represent highly subjective, poetic view of the landscape, people, and the city. The analysis also includes verbal images that represent visions of development conceived by different positions of government, both state and local bodies, that strategically direct development by creating a framework for the transformation of the place, both planning and financial. So the case of Postira follows the industrialization of the first and third modernizations, whereby the factory grew out of the traditional island activity, that is fishing. The factory building itself very unobtrusively occupied the coastal area. It is presented on the left image. The factory is located next to the historical core, but in a separate bay, and was iconographically invisible. The significance of the factory came to the fore at the very moment of its relocation and the opening of a large hotel in its place, presented on the right image. In terms of identity, the hotel suppresses the factory and transforms the appearance and meaning of the entire place, with its scale and forms. So tourism, in the case of Postira, is perceived as a degradation and deconstruction that threaten local values and a way of life. Thank you.